Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cast and Spear podcast. My name is John, and we have back on the show Erica Nelson, the host of the Awkward Angler podcast and a fly fishing guide out in Colorado. Welcome to the show, Erica.
Thanks.
Today we're going to be talking about how to choose the right fly for the right situation. So Erica, can you enlighten us on this topic?
Sure. So, whenever you're fly fishing, there's basically three different types of flies that are used. The first one is a dry fly. So what that does is just sit right on top of the water, and you're basically mimicking a fly either hatching or a dead fly that's just kind of chilling on top of the water. And then the second type is nymphing, and so those are also called wet flies as well. And that's just basically underneath the surface. And so you're mimicking the little bugs that live underneath the rocks. In the water, that's actually what the fish are eating. And so the third type is streamer fishing. And so you're they're really pretty. They come in all different types of colors. And you're basically mimicking like a small fish, is what you're doing with those three different types of fly fishing. So different types a year require different types of flies. There's also kind of some passion, I would say, that maybe a person just likes to dry fly only, dry or die type of fly fishing people. So I was once like that, and then I didn't catch many fish, so I started nymph fishing, which then you're kind of looking at an indicator because you can't see the fly, underneath the surface most of the time. So you need an indicator, or like a bobber, whatever you want to call it. But you're basically just kind of looking at that. And so I've kind of modified my rigs a little bit. I like to kind of do what's called a dry dropper. So instead of looking at a bobber or an indicator, I like to look at a big dry fly, and then I'll attach like a nymph to the bottom. And that kind of helps me figure out what the fish are eating, especially this time of year in the summer. It's really fun dry fly fishing this time of year. There's a lot of great hatches that are coming off of the water. And so you're basically just wanting to, that they call match the hatch. And so whatever you're seeing in the air or whatever you're seeing flying around, just look in your fly box and see if there's any like colors or patterns that might look similar. You don't have to get it super spot on, but I mean, even just something similar can work out. If you're wanting to kind of do more nymph fishing, there's things you can do. You can kind of kick up some rocks and kind of collect some bugs, and kind of see what kind of bugs they're eating, kind of nymphs they're eating. Maybe it's a stonefly or a caddis or a midge and whatnot. So then you're kind of, again, looking at your fly box and kind of looking at similar colors and whatnot. So those are kind of more or less the two things that I do. And then with streamer fishing, I like doing that in like really deep water. So if there's like a deep pool, I like to use a weighted fly line that kind of gets my streamer down lower into those deep pockets. And then I'm just kind of stripping that line in, and it's super fun. Brown trout are pretty aggressive at those, and it's a really fun catch if you can streamer fish. And so those are three different types. And I would say, looking at the seasons is really going to also be a really good indicator. We have a runoff season. So, whenever springtime comes around, the snow is melting, the water levels are really high. That can turn the water really muddy. And so typically what works really effectively is just a San Juan worm, like a red worm, I would say typically works really well in those conditions. And so, and then as, we move into the summertime, again, you're going to see a lot more dry fly hatches. So I've been fishing the last couple of days with a single dry fly only. And to me, that is really fun. I love watching fish come out of the water, attack your fly, and it's always a good time. And then once we move into the fall, you'll probably start nymphing a little bit more. Those fish aren't coming to the surface as much. There's not as many hatches. And then same thing with the winter as well. So I do a lot of nymphing in the winter. You can get by with a dry fly. You can try. I always do. Why not? But most effective would be nymphing or streamer fishing as well, when you can't see fish rising on top of the water.
So you're saying you had a dry fly rig that then had a a wet fly underneath. So are you
Mhm.
almost like dropper looping, or not drop shotting the top fly, and then you just do another leader line below, and then you're kind of
Yeah.
like moving. Are you kind of like jostling the tip a little bit to get action, or you just let it coast down in the current and then figure out how do you kind of fish that one?
Yeah, so that rig setup, yeah, that's totally. I'm just attaching it to the dry hook, more tippet, depending on the water or the water depth, is something that I'm looking for, and I'm just letting it dead drift, both of them through that cast.
And then for dry fly stuff, do you put the wax on top of the fly to make it float, or do you just
Yes, yeah. So there's different types of what's called floatant, but it's pretty much just a silicone base that you're lubing up your fly. That kind of gets it sitting right on top of the water, looking like a realistic fly, essentially. So yeah,
Sorry, I got a lot of questions. This is fascinating
great.
to me. When you're taking out the streamers, are you bringing a different setup that has or do you just bring a different spool for your reel that's a different line choice?
Yeah, I mean, you can fish streamers just on your same rig setup that you would a dry or a nymph. You don't really need to change anything. And so that is a possibility, but I've been kind of getting more and more into it. So where I will actually bring two rods to the river. So that way I can have my different reel with the sinking line, whereas my other two rigs have floating line on them. And then I'm not having to switch out reels or line or whatnot. So I just bring two rods with me. Is something that I do. But you can absolutely fish a streamer with your other rigs.
Right on. And then nymphing, that's the same thing as check nymphing, right? Or is that different?
I'm not sure. I don't know what Czech nymphing is.
Oh, like
Sorry.
check as in like the Czech
Like,
Republic.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I was in Barcelona and they were showing me some like, here's how they catch big fish over here, and it's the Czech nymph, and I thought it was just the ones with the little bead on the top of it, so it's a little bit heavy. And then what they do is they kind of like move the tip of the rod up and it kind of like
Mm.
bounces up and down.
Oh,
So
yes.
I've been doing that with like my Tenkara and it's really effective. But
Oh, you know what we call that Euro nymphing. So same
okay,
thing.
same thing.
Okay, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just haven't heard it called Czech nymphing, but no, that would be Euro nymphing. Yeah. And then your leader has different colors and you're basically using that as your indicator as that's like floating through.
Hmm, perfect.
Yeah.
And then if you had to pick, because I know in Tenkara there's like this, oh, you only need one fly and you don't need to get all complicated over there in
Yeah.
Japan. Like there's that kind of methodology. If you had to pick one, maybe two flies to have in your kit at all times, what would you be picking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say I am a fan of, the dry dropper. So I would probably pick um like a there's like there's two different types of like flies. You can like match the hatch where it's like specifically that type of fly. And there's also attractor flies that don't really mimic anything, but fish happen to be attracted to it. And so I like the attractors. I am a fan of them because they work and they're effective. So, but I would say there's like a parachute Adams that sits on top of the water. That's a really effective fly for me. That has been pretty awesome. And then I'm a fan of this other nymph. It's called the BLM, and it's like a gold color. It's kind of like a brass color. To me, it looks like a caddis, and I don't know. It just is a really awesome fly that works for me in any type of water that I fished in Colorado.
I dig it. I gotta check those ones out. Well, I think
Yeah.
that's perfect. Thanks, Erica, for being on the show. Tomorrow we are going to talk a little. We're going to change topics a little bit, and how you can improve your fishing through dating apps. It's going to be a fun one. All right, guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Hey guys, one more thing before you go. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast app. And if you like the podcast, please consider rating it on Apple Podcasts and leaving a review. This helps other people find the show. Thanks.